Night falls over Rome like a velvet curtain, and behind the marble doors of the patrician houses, lamps are lit, perfumes stirred into the air, and the city's most guarded conversations begin. Here, power wears silk. Desire speaks in glances. Wine loosens the knots of politics. This is not merely a feast. It is the theater where Rome is quietly remade. One whispered promise at a time. Breathe slowly now, and let the centuries fold back like the pages of a forgotten scroll. We stand at the perfumed threshold of a Roman night that will never be written in law, yet will ripple through the marble corridors of power like a whisper carried on warm air. Here, in the atrium of a patrician's domus, the day's civic masks have already been set aside. The clink of bronze lamp chains, the faint splash of water from the fountain, the careful shuffling of slippered feet over polished stone. All these sounds weave into the night's first quiet tapestry. The air is heavy, perfumed with myrrh and crushed rose petals. From somewhere deep within the house, a slow rhythm of strings begins, each note lingering, coaxing the heart into softer beats. Slaves, barefoot and silent, glide like shadows, bearing silver trays piled with figs, still warm from the orchard sun. Honey-glazed dates, almonds soaked in wine, their sweetness meant to dissolve the day's sharp edges. The guests arrive not as mere diners, but as players in a theater of influence. The togas of senators sway alongside the diaphanous silks of courtesans, their fabrics speaking of wealth, of alliances, of debts owed and favors promised. Eyes meet, linger, glance away, each movement its own line of dialogue in the unwritten play unfolding tonight. No word of the Republic's business will be spoken outright, but here, over diluted wine and shared laughter, marriages will be arranged, political enemies softened, and fortunes turned toward the fates of those bold enough to charm. The couches are arranged in a soft crescent, an embrace of crimson and ivory cushions, inviting bodies to lean closer than law would ever allow in daylight. Fingers brush as cups are passed. An ankle shifts just enough to catch a glimmer of gold at the heel. The meaning is not lost on anyone. Wine, deep as garnet, is poured in a slow ribbon, its surface trembling in the lamplight. No one here drinks it uncut. To do so would be to abandon the art of control. Instead, water tempers the grape, just as smiles temper ambition. And so, the first hour blooms gently. Voices lower to murmurs. The lamps throw shadows upon the frescoes. Dionysus crowned in ivy, Aphrodite poised in eternal beauty. Gods who have watched 1,000 nights like this. Outside, the city hums with its own life. But within these walls time moves differently. Every glance, every taste, every breath is part of the ritual, and to join it is to step into a current, where pleasure and politics are never separate streams, but one deep, winding river. Tonight we drift upon that river, carried not towards sleep, but into the slow intoxication of Rome's most secret theater. The first toast has been made, the wine has kissed the lips of every guest, and the theater of the night now shifts to its main stage, the table. But in Rome, the table is never only a place for eating. It is a map of status, a chessboard of influence, and a script written in olives, figs, and the slow passing of cups. Each couch, each lectus, holds 3 bodies, and even this arrangement is no accident. To the left, the host's place, the axis of the room's power, from which conversation radiates like the spokes of a golden wheel. Beside him, the guest of honor, placed not for comfort, but so that every eye may measure his reactions. Opposite, the rival ally, a man whose fortunes may turn tonight, depending on the tilt of a smile, the warmth of a greeting. The table itself gleams under the lamplight, its inlaid ivory and mother of pearl. Reflecting bowls of pomegranates split open, their jeweled seeds glistening like drops of fresh blood. Figs, dark and heavy with sweetness, sit beside roasted quail, their skin brushed with honey. Each dish is more than taste. It is symbol, message, and memory. Pomegranates speak of fertility, of alliances meant to bear fruit. Quail, of luxury, rare and fleeting, a reminder that pleasures, and favors must be seized when offered. Honey cakes promise sweetness at the end of a bitter bargain. Servants move like well-trained shadows, refilling golden cups, adjusting cushions, their ears sharper than any senator's. They are the unspoken record-keepers of Rome's private dealings. And then, the gestures. A fingertip runs slowly along the rim of a cup, a sign of intrigue or perhaps impatience. A glance held across the table, a heartbeat longer than necessary. An invitation or a warning. The casual offer of a fig from one plate to another. A gesture as intimate as the brush of a hand in the street. Laughter rises in gentle waves, never loud enough to drown the undercurrent of meaning. Even the serving of wine is measured, 3 parts water to 2 parts wine, ensuring minds stay sharp while hearts grow bolder. Above them, frescoes of the gods look on. Bacchus reclines among nymphs, a reminder that the divine once walked in pleasure as mortals do now. Athena, sharp-eyed, presides silently from the far wall, her gaze a reminder that wit, not just beauty, commands respect here. Slowly, the table becomes the stage, where words are not merely spoken but offered like precious artifacts. The placement of a dish, the passing of a cup, even the angle at which one reclines, is part of the conversation. Outside, the Tiber flows black beneath the moon, but here, time is held still in the lamplight, and every fig, every drop of wine, every shared glance, is another move in the quiet game that will decide who holds Rome's ear when the sun returns. The hour has grown warmer now, not in the air, but in the rhythm of the room. The table's careful dance of politics gives way to a more fluid, more dangerous current. This is the courtesan's hour. They do not arrive late by accident. Their entrance is a second wave of the evening, a tide that reshapes the shoreline of conversation. Silk whispers against marble as they cross the room, their eyes not searching but claiming, choosing their audience before a single word is spoken. No man in Rome will admit, at least in daylight, that he learns as much from these women as from any senator in the Curia. Yet it is true, the courtesans speak in a language that needs no Senate decree to bind a man. A pause before accepting a cup, a fingertip tracing the rim of a bowl, a laugh timed to fall just as another's voice falters. These are their orations. They know the art of reclining, a shoulder turned just enough to draw the gaze along the slope of a neck, a knee angled toward or away, opening or closing the invisible door between two people. In this theater, their bodies are not the play. They are the stage, the script, the unspoken law. They listen more than they speak, for in a room like this, every unguarded word is a coin of value. One drapes herself beside a rising politician, her voice low enough to be mistaken for music, drawing from him his ambitions, his grudges, his fears. Another sits opposite a rival general, offering him olives with a smile. That promises nothing and everything. It is not love they offer, nor the illusion of it. It is attention, rare, unbroken, precise. A thing more intoxicating than any wine. The music swells softly in the corner. A lyre, its notes bending like molten gold in the air, fills the pauses between laughter. Somewhere, a jug of wine tips, a thin stream running into a waiting cup, its scent mingling with the sharp sweetness of crushed figs. The courtesans know that they are watched. By the men, by one another, by the gods painted on the walls. They move not as rivals, but as dancers in a pattern too ancient to name. Each gesture answers another. Each smile sets a ripple moving across the couches. And the men, powerful, ambitious, armored in public life, find themselves momentarily unmoored. Here, their victories mean less than the warmth of a glance, their wealth less than the momentary surrender of letting someone else hold the thread of the evening. Outside, Rome's streets grow quiet under the stars. But within these walls, the courtesans hold the night in their hands like a ripe fruit, and every man in the room knows it is theirs to offer, and theirs to let fall. The night has begun to loosen its hair. The edges of formality have softened. The posture of politics has melted into the slow curve of comfort. Here, In the lamplit cradle of the triclinium, the wine has taken hold, not in the stumble or slur of excess, but in the measured warmth that unfastens the first buttons of caution. Wine in Rome is never merely wine. It is a patient instrument, a key turned in the lock of restraint, poured in gold or silver, cut with cool water in proportions debated as fiercely as law. It slips past the lips as a friend, and settles in the chest as a conspirator. Each pour is deliberate. The servant tilts the jug slowly, allowing the thin stream to curl into the goblet like a ribbon of deep garnet. The sound is small, but in the stillness between bursts of laughter, it is a whisper that says stay a little longer, speak a little freer, lean a little closer. Conversations that began in the safe shallows now drift toward deeper currents. The senator who spoke earlier of trade routes now speaks of fears, of omens in the forum, of a rival's weakness that could be turned to advantage. The young patrician, all poise at the evening start, now rests his chin on one hand, eyes fixed on the courtesan beside him, as if she alone holds the map to the empire's heart. The air grows thick with scent, spilled wine mingling with the honey glaze on roasted figs, the resin of burning incense curling into the folds of silk. A musician plucks a slow melody on the lyre, its notes pooling in the corners of the room like warm light. The courtesans move with practiced ease, adjusting the drape of a shawl, brushing back a lock of hair, each motion measured, as if to remind the room that nothing here is accidental. A laugh drips like honey into the air, and men turn toward it without realizing they have moved. Some speak in fragments now, their sentences trailing off into glances, as though the words are less important than the spaces between them. Others lean in, voices low enough that only one pair of ears may claim the secret. It is in this hour, the hour when the wine's whisper has fully taken root, that the most delicate bargains are struck, not with a signed tablet or a public oath, but with a clasped hand under the table, a promise murmured into the curl of a shoulder, an agreement sealed not by law, but by the shared knowledge of what is owed in return. Above them, the painted Bacchus smiles from the wall, ivy twined in his hair, goblet in hand, as though he knows the quiet power of this moment. It is not the shouts of the forum or the clash of legions that will shift the tides of Rome tonight, but the slow, deep current that runs here, between cup and mouth, between whisper and ear. And so the wine continues its patient work, blurring the edges between politics and pleasure, until they are no longer separate things at all, but one deep river flowing through the heart of Rome. Masks in Rome were not only for the theater, they were worn here too, woven not of cloth or clay, but of courtesy, of wit, of the practiced art of concealment. The elite learned early how to sculpt their faces into marble serenity, their voices into rivers that carried only what they chose to reveal. Every raised eyebrow, every measured sip of Falernian wine, was a sentence in an unspoken dialogue. Yet tonight, something cracks. It is not loud. No shattering glass, no shouted word, just the briefest shift, like the tremor in a statue before it falls. A senator's smile falters when his rival makes a remark too sharp to ignore. The courtesan beside him feels the change, the way a hawk feels the air tighten before the prey bolts. Her fingers, adorned with rings carved in delicate serpents, rest lightly on his wrist. She does not speak. Her silence says more. The lamp flames sway as if leaning in to listen, and for a moment, there is no music from the lyre in the corner, no gentle murmur of servants pouring wine, only the long, stretched pause, in which truths threaten to rise to the surface, like air bubbles escaping the depths of a black river. But the mask is replaced. The smile returns. The laughter, perhaps too loud, fills the air again. Deals will be made, oaths will be broken, but none will leave tonight speaking of the tremor they felt. Because here in Rome, power survives not by strength alone, but by knowing when to let the mask slip, and when to fasten it tighter than ever. The hour grows late. Outside, the streets of Rome are cooling into darkness, but here, within this marble-walled triclinium, The air is warmer than ever, thick with the mingling perfumes of spiced oil, crushed petals, and the smoky sweetness of the lamps that burn in bronze bowls. The feast is not over, for it was never merely about food or wine. It is now that the real games begin, those without dice or board, but with stakes far higher. Cups are refilled until the rims glisten, the wine within dark as garnet and twice as dangerous. The patricians recline closer together, heads inclined as if in intimacy, but each mind is already weaving its net, careful, subtle, waiting for the right moment, to ensnare a promise, a weakness, a future favor. The courtesans know their roles in this theater. Some laugh lightly, fingers trailing, over the shoulders of men whose attention they keep alive. With just enough mystery, their laughter like a ribbon, tying together the silence between political barbs. Others move between couches, with trays of figs, honey cakes, and tiny bowls of olives slicked with oil, but their true offering is not food. It is presence. It is the careful placing of a body, the whisper timed between two sentences, the gentle shaping of desire into influence. And then, someone proposes a game, not the gladiator's gamble of coin and wager, but the philosopher's duel wrapped in the skin of jest. Each guest must tell a truth, one that shames or shocks, and yet, not so plainly as to be crude. The truth must be clothed in metaphor, so that the clever may decipher it, and the foolish may be amused. The senator leans forward, his voice low, confessing, though not directly, that his allegiance in the forum is bought by a woman whose eyes never meet his in public. A general admits that the fiercest battle he ever fought was not in Gaul or Germania, but in the bed of a rival's wife. Laughter follows, but beneath the sound is a sharpened silence, as each person measures the others anew, their eyes narrowing as truths land like thrown daggers. For here, in this chamber, truth is not an enemy, it is a weapon, and in the hands of the skilled, it can wound without spilling a drop of blood. The courtesans smile faintly, their cold dark eyes giving away nothing, but they are listening, always listening. Every word is a coin to be stored, to be spent later, perhaps in the bedchamber, perhaps in the Senate hall, or perhaps when an enemy's back is turned. The night stretches further. Outside, the city sleeps. But here, the game is still in motion. And in Rome, the games of truth are rarely over. When the wine runs dry, the air is heavy now, not with smoke nor incense, but with the scent of unspoken intentions. The laughter at the table has thinned, becoming low ripples of sound, like the lap of water against a marble fountain in the dark. The torches sway in their bronze stands, their flames bending to the night's slow breath, casting shadows that stretch and twist along the painted walls. In those moving shapes, faces are briefly stolen, replaced by masks of animal silhouettes. A wolf's snout, a falcon's beak, a serpent's coil. Rome is full of such shifting forms, for its people, like its politics, change shape to survive. At the far end of the triclinium, two men lean close enough to share a single whisper, their hands idly playing with the rims of wine cups, as though they were only passing time. But the weight of their gaze, the measured tilt of their shoulders, speaks of treaties unspoken, plots without parchment. A courtesan drifts past them, her eyes half-lidded in feigned distraction, yet her ears keen as hunting dogs. She will carry their words later, not to the Senate, but to a patron more dangerous still. Her bracelets chime softly, the signal of a spy hiding in plain sight. Beyond the table's laughter and the hum of the lyre, there is another Rome here tonight, one not written in history's marble, but in wine stains, handshakes under the cloth, and debts sealed with the press of a ring. The host watches from his seat, his smile slow and deliberate, like a man who knows the play will end in his favor. He does not hurry. In Rome, victory belongs not to the loudest, but to the one who can sit longest in the quiet. And so the feast continues, as all great games of power do, in the space between what is said and what is truly meant. The night has fully claimed the house. Shadows bend, long and slow, against the frescoed walls. The lamp's flames flicker like tiny, trembling hearts, casting pools of amber over the folds of silk and the gleam of bronze. The table has emptied and refilled so many times that its dishes now feel like worn paths in the labyrinth of the evening. Yet each fig, each olive, each drop of wine carries meaning, deliberate, subtle, and layered like the voices in the room. Men lean closer than they intended. Eyes linger longer than civility allows. Lips part with a word, not fully formed, a suggestion, a question, a dare disguised as a compliment. And the courtesans, ever attentive, glide through the spaces in between, their movements measured, fluid, hypnotic. They are the heartbeat of the room, its pulse hidden beneath the laughter and the clinking of goblets. Some speak of alliances in the forum, others of debts owed or favors promised. But always, beneath the words, the current flows quietly, in the brush of a hand, in the tilt of a shoulder, in the fleeting touch of a finger over the rim of a cup. Outside, Rome sleeps, unaware. But within these walls, time has slowed and folded in on itself. The Tiber whispers against its stone banks, and the city's heartbeat seems distant, diminished by the warm, fragrant air of this night. The music from the lyre is slow now, each note stretched like spun gold, and every string plucked feels like a finger tracing secrets across the barest skin of comprehension. The musicians do not rush, for no one here wishes the night to end. And then, in a quiet corner, the first signs of weariness appear. A senator's hand trembles slightly as he lifts his goblet. A courtesan tilts her head, eyes heavy, though the smile does not falter. Even the servants move more deliberately, their steps measured to maintain the rhythm of the room. Yet, despite fatigue, the energy does not fade. It lingers in the air, in the space between bodies, in the soft exchange of glances too loaded for words. This is Rome distilled to its essence. Power, pleasure, politics, desire, all entwined into a single, intoxicating current. And in the still moments, when the laughter is quiet, and only the soft murmur of conversation remains, one begins to understand the unspoken truth of these nights. That influence is neither bought nor begged. It is taken, it is offered, it is danced through gestures, glances, and whispered words beneath the lamp's gentle flame. Tonight, alliances are made not with ink, but with breath, with touch, with the slow, deliberate movements that only those who understand this theater can master. And as the night deepens, the river of desire and ambition flows ever stronger, carrying all who have stepped into it toward the first light of dawn, where the masks will be donned again, and Rome will wake, unaware of the truths whispered beneath the flickering lamps. The night has ebbed, leaving behind its quiet tide. The lamps flicker lower, their flames shivering as if reluctant to surrender to the coming light. Even the shadows seem slower now, curling against the walls as though in mourning for the passing of their brief dominion. The guests stir, not abruptly, but as one might wake from a dream too vivid to let go. Eyes open slowly, hands stretch along the soft folds of cushions. Voices begin to return to the measured tones of civility. The wine has done its work. The carefully constructed masks have been worn and then allowed to slip. Truths, secrets, subtle alliances, all whispered, hinted, exchanged, remain suspended in the air like invisible perfume. The courtesans, ever graceful, move among the couches one final time. Their touches are light now, almost ceremonial, retracing the invisible paths they carved through the night. Each gesture a seal, each glance a quiet claim. They were here. They shaped this night. They carry its stories forward. Outside, Rome begins to awaken. Birds stir in the olive groves. The Tiber catches the first pale threads of dawn, and the distant clang of a bell signals the city's slow return to order. Yet inside, time remains fluid. The night lingers in the echo of laughter, in the subtle tilt of a cup left untouched, in the faint traces of wine and honey on the marble table. Here, in these final moments, the unspoken agreements of the night solidify. Alliances made without ink, promises given in glances, debts acknowledged in the press of a finger along a goblet's rim. Power has shifted, subtly, like a slow current beneath a calm surface, and those who understand this flow will carry its advantages far beyond these walls. The courtesans gather their shawls and silks, their work complete. Servants refill the last cups, sweep the last crumbs, and the triclinium returns to quiet. The frescoed gods look down upon the aftermath, Bacchus reclining, Venus smiling faintly, as if satisfied with the night's performance. And then, as the first rays of sun stretch across the marble floors, the guests rise, their bodies heavy with the pleasures and intrigues of the night, yet their minds already shifting toward the obligations of the day. They leave in silence, each step measured, each glance deliberate, knowing that the games begun here will echo far into the life of the city. The room breathes in its own stillness, a chamber emptied of bodies but filled with the memory of intent, desire, and strategy. And though the lamps have dimmed, the night's lessons endure, whispering that Rome is never conquered by force alone, but by patience, observation, and the subtle mastery of the spaces between pleasure and power. The lamps have been extinguished. The echoes of laughter, of whispered promises, fade like distant waves against the stones of the city. Where moments ago there was warmth and motion, now there is only the hush of marble and the lingering perfume of oil, wine, and crushed petals. The courtesans have departed, their silks rustling softly against the steps of servants, their presence leaving behind traces invisible to those who do not know where to look. They have carried with them the knowledge, the secrets, the unspoken debts of power, and the room remembers them still. The guests have vanished into the streets of Rome, their minds heavy with reflection, their hearts tempered by caution. Every glance, every touch, every whispered word from the night will ripple outward, affecting meetings in the forum, decisions in the Senate, and the subtle hierarchies of private households. The wine-stained tables are quiet now. The golden goblets catch the early sunlight and gleam like reminders of the pleasures and intrigues that unfolded within these walls. Even the frescoes seem to watch, the gods immortalized in pigment and plaster, bearing silent witness to the delicate choreography of ambition and desire. In the corners, shadows linger, stretching and shrinking as the morning grows. The servants move like ghosts, sweeping away crumbs, pouring water, setting the room in order. Their motions precise, almost ritualistic, as if to honor the sacred balance between indulgence and duty. And yet, despite the outward return to stillness, the room itself carries memory, the subtle tension of alliances made, the quiet surrender of power in a glance, the dance between pleasure and influence. All of it pulses beneath the surface, invisible but enduring. Rome awakens beyond the walls. Streets fill with footsteps, voices, carts, and animals. The Tiber reflects the pale light of dawn, carrying the city's pulse downstream. And somewhere, in a distant forum or villa, men and women will move as if guided by invisible strings woven in the darkness of this very night. For the triclinium has emptied, but the consequences of its pleasures and its subtle negotiations will linger far longer than the morning sun. And so, the quiet aftermath is not emptiness, but memory, a living record of influence, desire, and power, held in the folds of silk, the tilt of a goblet, the trace of a finger on marble. It whispers, softly, insistently, that Rome is not built merely by walls and legions, but by the nights when men and women play the games of truth beneath its lamps. Morning unfolds slowly in the castle, the pale light filtering through narrow windows, touching the polished stone floors and the edges of gilded tapestries. Here, in this hall, a different kind of ritual begins, one of silk and wool, of velvet and leather, of threads embroidered with power, wealth, and rank. Clothing in medieval England is not merely protection against the cold, nor is it mere adornment. It is language, a language spoken without a word, where every fold, every color, every stitch announces identity, allegiance, and aspiration. The noblewoman lifts her wimple carefully over her hair, its crisp linen pressed to conceal and define, to signal piety, respectability, and adherence to the invisible hierarchy that rules not only the household, but the kingdom itself. Her gown, heavy with embroidery and lined with fur, sways with deliberate grace, each movement an assertion of her place within this social architecture. Across the hall, men adjust codpieces and pointed shoes, their polished leather glinting in the rising sun. These are not idle ornaments. They are symbols of virility, status, and command, announcing the wearer's right to claim attention, to enter councils, to be counted in the eyes of the king and his court. Even the slight exaggeration of a point or the curve of a hem becomes a statement, deliberate and visible, a negotiation of identity played out in cloth and thread. Sumptuary laws whisper behind every gesture, regulating who may wear what, restricting color, fabric, and embellishment, to maintain order in the rigid hierarchy of medieval life. Yet within these rules, creativity thrives like ivy along castle walls. A carefully chosen brooch, a hidden seam, a subtle flourish in the lining of a sleeve, all speak volumes to those who know how to read the signs. Servants move silently, assisting in the careful draping of gowns, tying belts and lacing gloves, adjusting layers of clothing with precision that borders on reverence. Each motion is part of the morning ritual, an enactment of discipline, hierarchy, and beauty. And in this quiet, measured world, fashion is more than display. It is armor, it is weapon, it is promise. It shapes how others perceive the wearer, how they respond, how they yield or resist. A gown can open doors, a codpiece can command attention, a veil can hide secrets or invite speculation. The air is thick with scent, oils and perfumes extracted from herbs, flowers, and rare spices, blending with the lingering smoke of candles and hearth fires. It is a room alive with silent communication, where power is sewn into seams and ambition is threaded through hems. Here, the morning stretches into the slow rhythm of preparation, and every figure in the hall, noble or attendant, participates in the quiet choreography that defines not only appearance, but influence, respect, and survival. Cloth, thread, and leather are not idle adornments. They are instruments in the orchestration of identity. And as the first steps of the day echo along stone corridors, the kingdom awakens, its hierarchy visually declared, its social code woven into every garment, every belt, every wimple, every carefully pointed shoe. The morning deepens, and the noblemen move with careful deliberation. Every adjustment of a tunic, every tightening of a belt, every angle of a codpiece is a silent negotiation, a declaration of virility, status, and the right to be noticed. The codpiece is no mere garment. It is armor, it is symbol, it is weapon. Exaggerated, padded, decorated with embroidery and jewel, it proclaims strength without a word, announcing to all who see it that the wearer is prepared for more than combat, prepared for attention, influence, and display. Pointed shoes stretch across polished floors, their tips impossibly elongated, sometimes curved upward, sometimes trailing small bells. They signal wealth, leisure, and daring. The impracticality itself is the proof of privilege. For a man who must toil in the fields cannot parade in such footwear. Only those of means, of status, of courtly ambition can bend practicality into performance. The crown, when placed upon the brow, becomes the culmination of this ritual of display. Its weight is both literal and symbolic, a reminder of authority, of hierarchy, of the delicate balance between power and expectation. Every jewel reflects sunlight like a mirror that multiplies the wearer's presence, its gleam as much a declaration as the spoken word. Servants move with quiet precision, adjusting folds, pinning hidden seams, sprinkling perfumes of rare herbs and oils, their hands deft, almost invisible. They are guardians of appearance, ensuring that every gesture, every garment, perfectly communicates the intended signal to the world beyond the chamber. Sumptuary laws hover like invisible judges, dictating color, fabric, and ornamentation, enforcing the rigid social hierarchy through what is worn rather than said. Yet even within these strictures, creativity flourishes. A jewel hidden beneath a tunic, a lining of rare fabric glimpsed only by the observant, a shoe slightly sharper, a codpiece slightly higher. These are whispers of identity, subtle claims of personality and power, woven into cloth, leather, and thread. The hall hums with the rhythm of ritual. Cloth rustles, leather creaks, gold glints. Perfume rises in the warm air. Every movement is intentional, every glance carries weight, and every item of dress communicates without a single word. Here, power is sewn into seams, authority folded into layers, and ambition stitched into hems. The codpiece and the crown are not vanity. They are instruments of social negotiation, weapons in the silent wars of influence, waged in corridors, halls, and courts. And as the day slowly stretches toward the castle's outer courtyards, the kingdom awakens, its hierarchy visible, its values displayed in fabric and form, its people moving in a quiet, measured choreography that balances display, duty, and desire. In these early hours, before counsel and conversation begin, before letters are delivered and decrees spoken, fashion is both shield and signal, armor and declaration, the unspoken language of power, ambition, and the enduring pursuit of presence in a world built on hierarchy. The laws are written, their letters inked with authority, but their power is woven into the very fabric of the day. Sumptuary laws, a spell cast over cloth, thread, and color, regulating not only what is worn, but who may wear it, and what it communicates to every observing eye. In medieval England, clothing is more than protection, more than adornment. It is the mirror of society, a visible language of hierarchy, privilege, and constraint. The richest silks and velvets, the deepest reds and purest whites, are reserved for the few whose birthright grants them access. Others may imitate, may long, may desire, but the law draws the lines, invisible yet strict, across the shoulders, waists, and feet of the people. Noble women adjust their gowns, hands moving over embroidery and folds, careful that every detail conforms to expectation, even as they infuse the ensemble with subtle flourishes that speak to personal taste, family identity, or hidden defiance. Every accessory, every clasp, every glint of gold is both permitted and constrained, a negotiation between law and expression, obedience and ambition. Men, too, are bound by invisible threads of regulation. Their codpieces, their shoes, their tunics, each must align with rank, with inheritance, with the kingdom's vision of order. Yet within these rules, ingenuity thrives. A slightly longer point to a shoe, a hidden lining of rich fabric, a jewel set in a way that only the discerning eye will notice. These are small rebellions, whispers of identity asserting itself. Within the boundaries of control, the sumptuary spell is both protective and restrictive. It preserves social order, ensures recognition of status, and reinforces the invisible hierarchy that shapes every encounter. Yet at the same time, it challenges the wearer to find ingenuity, to navigate the space between legal expectation and personal expression, to signal subtly, to communicate without breaking the law. Attendants move silently, hands adjusting hems and hoods with care, fingers brushing against silk and velvet, soothing the fabrics into compliance, while also preparing them for the world beyond the castle walls, where every observer is a judge, every glance a potential calculation of worth, every whisper a subtle reading of the hierarchy. The castle itself breathes with these rituals. Stone corridors echo with measured footsteps, wooden floors creak under the weight of layered garments, and the scent of perfumed oils and beeswax lingers, binding the space in a soft, fragrant discipline. Every detail, every movement, every fold of fabric is a note in the symphony of social order, a rhythm that all must follow or risk being misread. And yet, even under the watchful eyes of law and tradition, human ingenuity thrives. Hidden embroidery, clever accessories, subtle flourishes of color. These small acts are the secret language of the wearer, a dialogue between the individual and the society that both constrains and defines them. Thus, the sumptuary spell is not simply law. It is ritual, negotiation, artistry, and strategy. It binds, it guides, it shapes, but it cannot extinguish the spark of personal expression. Through fabric, thread, and color, through restraint and subtlety, every nobleman and noblewoman writes their story, dances their power, and claims their place within the hierarchy of a world built as much on appearances as on birthright and law. As the morning deepens and the castle awakens fully, the spell persists, quiet, pervasive, shaping the rhythm of every interaction. Every glance, every gesture, every measured step along the polished stone floors. Fashion is not merely adornment here. It is the language of power, a whispered dialogue of ambition, restraint, and identity, woven into every thread, every seam, and every fold. Color is not accidental. It is intention made visible. It speaks where words are forbidden, whispers where silence reigns, and signals authority in a world ruled by hierarchy, ritual, and law. In medieval England, the choice of hue is deliberate, a silent declaration of status, ambition, and allegiance. Crimson reds speak of wealth, courage, and power, a bold proclamation worn only by those sanctioned to claim it. Emerald greens hint at lineage, prosperity, and cultivated taste, while deep sapphire blues signal fidelity, nobility, and restraint. Golds and silvers shimmer in the light, reflecting not just the rising sun, but the wearer's place within the intricate lattice of social order. Noble women lift their gowns, hands tracing the folds to ensure that every shade, every seam, communicates as precisely as the text of a law. Even the faintest hint of a prohibited color could invite judgment, gossip, or censure. Yet, within this regulated spectrum, the subtle blending of tones, the careful layering of fabrics, becomes a quiet art, a personal signature, woven into the ritual of preparation for the day. Men, too, navigate this spectrum with care. Tunics of muted jewel tones, codpieces accentuated with gilded threads, shoes crafted from dyed leather, elongated to mark status, all reflect a careful negotiation between law, fashion, and identity. Every color chosen, every thread dyed, communicates intentions and expectations before a single word is spoken. The castle itself becomes a stage, the stone walls absorbing the movement of rich fabrics, the light catching each fold, each hue, turning corridors and halls into living tapestries of ambition, loyalty, and display. Attendants move as part of this choreography, aligning garments, brushing off dust, adjusting clasps, ensuring that every color is precise, every gesture aligned, so that the message of identity and rank is unambiguous. Perfumed oils and scented powders enhance the ritual, adding layers of invisible meaning to the visible language of cloth. Lavender hints at refinement, rose at cultivation, and myrrh, carried from distant lands, whispers of connections. Far beyond the castle walls, reaching into courts, markets, and alliances. Color and scent together form a dialogue, a ritualized communication that transcends words. And yet, the wearer always holds a measure of subtle defiance. A carefully blended shade, a hidden lining of forbidden silk, a jeweled clasp just slightly askew. These quiet acts of ingenuity assert individuality within the strictures of law and custom. Fashion becomes negotiation, negotiation becomes strategy, and every garment, every hue, is a participant in the delicate dance of perception, influence, and power. As the morning sun rises higher, illuminating tapestries, polished floors, and the faces of those preparing, the ritual of color reaches its full expression. The halls are alive with the conversation of shades, silent but potent, a language understood by the observant, a declaration of presence, identity, and hierarchy, woven into every thread, brushed across every fold, and carried with each measured step through the castle. Here, color is more than adornment. It is law, it is art, it is communication, and it is power. It shapes perception, guides behavior, and enforces the delicate balance between individuality and hierarchy. It is ritual, it is statement, it is survival, and it whispers, endlessly, the unspoken truths of ambition, status, and identity. Across the silent corridors of medieval England, the codpiece, bold, exaggerated, impossible to ignore. It is more than a garment. It is armor, it is instrument, it is declaration. In the quiet hours of the morning, the young nobleman adjusts it with care, ensuring its shape, its embellishment, its gleam. Every detail a statement of presence, virility, and subtle power. Pointed shoes extend along the stone floors, elongated to mark wealth and status, yet requiring skill to walk with balance and grace. The impracticality itself is a sign of privilege. The wearer has time to display, to perform, to participate in a silent game of observation, interpretation, and influence. Every gesture is deliberate. A turn of the heel, the careful tilt of a belt, the way light catches embroidered thread, all communicate messages understood only by those who watch. The codpiece is part of the courtier's language, a tool in a game of attention, favor, and subtle negotiation. Sumptuary laws hover invisibly, dictating what may be worn, who may wear it, what materials are permitted, and what colors are sanctioned. Yet within these boundaries, ingenuity flourishes. A jewel subtly sewn into a seam, a lining of rare fabric glimpsed only by the observant, a slight exaggeration of a point or curve, all become the silent signals of ambition, taste, and wit. The hall itself participates in this ritual. Stone corridors echo with deliberate steps. Sunlight spills across polished floors. Tapestries glimmer with the stories of hunts, feasts, and past triumphs. Every movement of fabric, every glint of leather, interacts with the architecture to amplify the performance, reminding all present that identity is not declared solely by words, but by posture, motion, and carefully chosen garments. Attendants move like shadows, unseen but essential, adjusting hems, brushing dust from embroidery, smoothing folds, and arranging clasps. They are custodians of the wearer's presence, ensuring that the codpiece, the shoes, the belt, everything communicates exactly as intended. The codpiece is audacious yet disciplined. It signals strength without force, presence without speech. It is flirtation, assertion, and armor rolled into one. A marker in the invisible game of influence that defines courtly life. And as the nobleman steps forward into the hall, his presence commands attention, yet measured and restrained. A balance between bold display and calculated subtlety. Every glance from an observer is noted, every reaction weighed, every gesture stored in memory, ready to inform future strategy, alliances, and decisions. The game of the court is played not only in conversation and counsel, but in movement, appearance, and silent negotiation. Cloth, leather, and metal become instruments of diplomacy, weapons of perception, and shields for ambition. Thus, the codpiece is never mere ornament. It is strategy in motion, a deliberate tool of power, and a whisper of identity carried with each careful step. In the quiet ritual of dressing, the young nobleman prepares not only for the day, but for the endless subtle contests that define his world. A world where status, ambition, and influence are sewn, strapped, and displayed in every fold, point, and line. The pointed shoe, elongated, impossible, deliberate. It is an instrument of identity, a language without words, a declaration of presence, wealth, and taste. Each step taken in these shoes is a negotiation, a subtle display of skill, poise, and privilege. for only those of means and leisure may navigate the corridors with such impractical elegance. In velvet, leather, and sometimes silk, the pointed shoe curves and extends, a visual punctuation marking status and intention. The longer the point, the more audacious the statement. Here walks a man who is wealthy enough to risk discomfort, who commands attention without uttering a sound, whose ambitions are sewn into every stitch. Women, too, wear elongated shoes, their pointed tips hidden beneath hems or revealed in deliberate steps. Each movement, each carefully measured stride, communicates subtlety and grace, a quiet assertion of control over both body and perception. The shoes whisper of refinement, of awareness, of belonging to a world where every glance, every gesture, every inch of fabric carries meaning. The corridors themselves participate in this ritual. Stone floors echo with measured footsteps, sunlight catches on polished leather, and the air, faint with the scent of beeswax and oils, is alive with the invisible conversation of hierarchy. Every observer notes the angle of a shoe, the curve of a tip, the rhythm of movement, small details in a silent language that governs social interaction, recognition, and respect. Tendons hover like shadows, smoothing hems, adjusting straps, ensuring that the shoes, the gowns, the tunics communicate exactly as intended. Even the smallest imperfection could alter perception, invite gossip, or challenge carefully maintained authority. Thus, attention to detail is not vanity. It is survival, negotiation, and strategy. The pointed shoe is both constraint and expression. It limits the body's freedom, yet it amplifies presence, turning each measured step into a signal, each motion into a statement. It is a tool of power, a badge of rank, a playful, daring whisper of identity. Through sunlight and shadow, through corridors lined with tapestries depicting hunts, feasts, and royal triumphs, the pointed shoes glide, click, and whisper along stone floors, an ongoing conversation between wearer and observer, between ambition and expectation, between hierarchy and personal expression. And as the morning unfolds, as gowns rustle and belts tighten, the pointed shoe, like the codpiece, the wimple, and the crown, becomes a ritual instrument, an unspoken dialogue, a social strategy, a testament to the intricate choreography that defines life in the castles and halls of medieval England. Here, every step matters. Every curve, every elongation, every glint of leather is a word in a language older than speech, a ritual of power, identity, and subtle negotiation, woven into the rhythm of the day, the measured passage of status, and the enduring game of observation, recognition, and influence. The veil descends slowly, soft as a whisper, yet heavy with meaning. It drapes over the noblewoman's shoulders, folds around her face and neck with deliberate care, and in its silent embrace, communicates restraint, refinement, and subtle authority. Every line of the fabric is intentional, every fold a measure of discipline and self-possession. The veil shields the gaze, yet reveals enough: a fleeting glimpse of the eyes, the curve of the jaw, the elegance of movement, a silent language understood by those attentive to nuance. The wimple beneath holds its shape, supporting the veil and guiding its folds, its stiffness balanced against the flowing softness of silk and linen. Together, they create a visual harmony, a layered dialogue between concealment and expression, modesty and assertion, obedience and individuality. The castle air is alive with ritual. Stone floors echo with quiet steps. Sunlight catches threads of gold and silver, and perfumed oils lend subtle fragrance to the scene. Attendants move with careful precision, smoothing fabric, adjusting pins, arranging clasps, ensuring that the veil falls perfectly, that the message of decorum, rank, and quiet power is perfectly expressed without a word being spoken. Even in silence, the veil speaks. It signals piety, lineage, and respect for tradition. It marks the wearer as part of a social order, where hierarchy is woven into every gesture, every thread, every fold. Yet within its folds, there is room for subtlety. A hidden flourish, a carefully chosen color lining, a glint of jewelry just visible, quiet acts of personal expression hidden within strict rules. The veil also protects, not just from eyes, but from judgment, scrutiny, and misinterpretation. It allows the noblewoman to move through halls and courts, with a measure of control over what is seen, how she is perceived, and how she navigates the complex network of alliances, rivalries, and whispered observation. As morning stretches onward, the veil becomes more than fabric. It is ritual, strategy, and armor. It softens gestures, amplifies presence, and participates in the delicate negotiation of identity and influence that governs every interaction in courtly life. In the quiet moments before the day fully awakens, before conversations are spoken and councils convened, the veil settles into place, and the noblewoman becomes both participant and observer, her identity shaped, revealed, and protected through the language of cloth, the discipline of ritual, and the silent power of subtlety. Here, silence is not absence. It is communication. It is authority. It is a measured, deliberate statement of who she is, where she belongs, and the invisible influence she wields. In a world defined as much by perception as by law, birth, and inheritance, the law hovers, unseen yet pervasive, its invisible hand guiding each fold of fabric, each glint of thread, each measured step along the polished stone floors. Sumptuary laws, written commands, yet living, breathing shadows that shape every gesture, every color, every ornament worn within the castle walls, and beyond, into markets, courts, and the careful observation of peers, to where the forbidden hue is to challenge order, to step outside the sanctioned spectrum of silk, wool, and velvet, to misalign a hem, a sleeve, a belt, is to risk judgment, gossip, and censure. Yet within these boundaries, creativity whispers, a subtle rebellion folded into patterns, hidden under linings, expressed in the gleam of a clasp, the curve of a codpiece, the delicate elongation of a pointed shoe. Each noblewoman, each nobleman moves like a player, in a grand, silent theater, where every gesture, every fold of fabric, every glint of jewelry is scrutinized, interpreted, recorded. The hall itself becomes a stage, stone walls absorbing footsteps and murmurs, sunlight catching embroidery and gilded threads, casting shadows that echo the invisible rules, and the quiet ingenuity used to navigate them. Attendants hover, unseen yet essential, their hands smoothing, adjusting, arranging. They are the custodians of perception, ensuring that what is seen aligns with law, yet leaves space for personal signature, for the subtle assertion of taste, lineage, and identity. Through their careful work, the clothing transforms into a language of diplomacy, of status, of quiet negotiation. The sumptuary shadows fall everywhere. They touch the folds of gowns, the edges of hoods, the points of shoes, the tips of codpieces, weaving a silent web of control and observation. Yet shadows can be shifted, bent, and softened. Within the narrow spaces of legality, the nobleman elongates a shoe, the noblewoman layers an embroidered lining, and the observer perceives subtlety, ingenuity, a quiet defiance wrapped in compliance. Even scent becomes a tool within the shadows. Perfumed oils, lavender, rosewater, and myrrh whisper across the stone floors, marking presence, distinguishing rank, and signaling refinement without uttering a single word. It is a delicate interplay of fabric, fragrance, gesture, and gaze, a choreography that reveals both obedience and individuality. And within these rituals, a constant tension persists, between law and ambition, between conformity and self-expression, between visible hierarchy and the hidden desires of the heart. Every glance from an observer is measured, every whisper noted, every gesture of adornment carefully calculated. The sumptuary shadows are never idle. They watch, they guide, they define the boundaries, even as the wearer finds ways to navigate, negotiate, and subtly assert identity. Through corridors and halls, over polished stone and under the filtered sunlight, fashion becomes a silent battlefield, where power is claimed, defended, and expressed, without a single word spoken. Cloth, thread, leather, and metal become instruments of diplomacy, tools of influence, and markers of both ambition and restraint. The shadow of law looms, yet within its limits, ingenuity thrives. The codpiece, the pointed shoe, the layered wimple, the flowing veil, all participate in this endless negotiation, balancing obedience and audacity, visibility and subtlety, in a world where perception shapes destiny, and where every fold, every glint, every carefully chosen color is a statement of identity, power, and survival. As the morning deepens, the hall breathes with these invisible forces, the sumptuary shadows weaving through each measured step, each adjusted hem, each glinting accessory. It is ritual, it is strategy, it is subtle art, a hypnotic interplay of law, ambition, and expression that will continue to shape every glance, every gesture, every heartbeat within the castle's walls. Here, under the watchful gaze of both law and peers, fashion is never frivolous. It is survival. It is diplomacy. It is power expressed, negotiated, and performed through the delicate, mesmerizing choreography of cloth, color, and shadow. Every garment is a language, every fold, every seam, every glint of thread a syllable in a conversation without words. The castle breathes with these silent messages, walls absorbing footsteps, whispers, and the rustle of silk, transforming hallways and chambers into living texts where identity, allegiance, and intent are written in cloth, leather, and color. A noblewoman layers her gown, choosing carefully between crimson and sapphire, the embroidery whispering loyalty, refinement, and subtle ambition. Her attendants smooth each fold, secure delicate clasps, adjust the drape of her wimple, and in this quiet choreography, meaning is inscribed into every visible detail. A hidden lining, a subtle twist of color, a jewel tucked beneath a sleeve. These are the notes of discretion, the secret annotations of individuality, woven seamlessly into the language of compliance. Men, too, participate in this silent discourse. The codpiece, elongated and ornate, signals confidence, virility, and social standing. Pointed shoes extend like punctuation, guiding perception with every careful step along polished stone. Tunics of layered fabrics, adorned with embroidery and metalwork, reflect both adherence to law and clever self-expression. Every element carries intention. Each movement is deliberate, measured, and meaningful. The castle itself is alive with interpretation. Stone floors echo with the rhythm of footsteps. Sunlight catches the shimmer of silk, velvet, and gold, casting dancing reflections across tapestries that depict feasts, hunts, and royal triumphs. Every observer reads the hall with trained eyes. Every glance notes the angle of a shoe, the curve of a hem, the gleam of a jewel, the subtle contrast of lining and embroidery. The silent messages of dress are never overlooked, for perception governs influence, and influence guides opportunity, alliance, and favor. Even scent participates in this communication. Lavender, rose, myrrh, and subtle oils announce refinement, education, and the reach of family networks. Perfumes linger in corridors, drifting over polished stone floors, blending with the faint rustle of fabric to form a multidimensional language, one understood by the astute, the attentive, the politically aware. Within these rituals, creativity and subtle defiance flourish. A carefully chosen hue, a hidden lining of rare fabric, a pattern glimpsed only when movement allows. These are whispers of personality, subtle resistance, quiet assertion of taste and ambition within the strictures of law. The wearer negotiates, invisibly yet profoundly, between social expectation and personal expression, between compliance and innovation, between visibility and discretion. The sumptuary shadows stretch across every corridor, touching hems, codpieces, veils, and pointed shoes, weaving through every measured step, reminding all present that hierarchy governs behavior, yet ingenuity always finds a way to shine, to bend the rules, and to signal meaning without defiance being obvious. In this world, clothing is never merely adornment. It is diplomacy and strategy. It is survival, influence, and communication. Every stitch, every fold, every carefully placed ornament is a deliberate act of negotiation with society, law, and peers. As the day unfolds, noblemen and noblewomen move through the castle, their attire performing a silent symphony of status, alliance, and subtle intention. Courts and chambers become stages, each corridor a theater, each glance a line in a complex dialogue that determines perception, opportunity, and power. The hidden messages of dress are a constant, layered, delicate, and profound. They persist in the rustle of fabric, the glint of gold, the subtle scent that drifts in the air, the shadows cast by sunlight across polished stone. It is an unspoken language, a whispered dialogue, a hypnotic dance of obedience, ambition, identity, and artistry, where every participant learns, interprets, and responds, their lives guided, measured, and elevated by the intricate, silent messages woven into every garment, every accessory, every fold, and every color of medieval England. Here, fashion is ritual, clothing is diplomacy, and every step taken in measured elegance is both an assertion and a negotiation, a silent testament to identity, hierarchy, and the enduring human desire to express oneself even under the strictest laws and expectations. The table is set and the hall is alive, not with words alone, but with sight, scent, movement, and presence. The feast is not merely nourishment, it is performance. It is a stage where every garment, every gesture, every glance communicates as much as any spoken declaration. Noblewomen adjust the folds of gowns, ensuring that embroidery, lining, and veil catch the light just so. Every jewel glimmers, every color vibrates, and the careful observer reads meaning in each nuance. Status, refinement, alliances, subtle preference, and even hidden ambition. Men, too, navigate this visual language, codpieces accentuated with embroidery or gilded threads, pointed shoes tapping delicately along polished stone, tunics layered to reflect both wealth and obedience to law. Every step, every lean toward a goblet, every tilt of the head is measured and deliberate, part of a silent conversation of hierarchy, attraction, and influence. The feast itself is a theater of observation. Platters of roasted meats, fruits, and delicacies are arranged with care, not merely to satisfy hunger, but to display abundance, taste, and refinement. The manner of handling a goblet, the way one samples a dish, becomes a subtle dialogue of etiquette and status. Food is performance. Drink is ritual. Together, they amplify the silent symphony of fashion, posture, and glance. Light dances across polished silver and reflective surfaces, catching threads of gold in embroidery, the sheen of velvet, the curve of a codpiece, the elongated tip of a shoe. Even the smallest movements become magnified, visible signals in the careful negotiation of favor, influence, and recognition. Attendants move like shadows, invisible yet essential. They pour wine, adjust veils, smooth hems, and ensure that every detail of appearance is perfect. The interplay of clothing, accessories, and gesture forms a complex web of communication, each layer conveying information, expectation, and subtle persuasion. Perfumed oils and fragrances mingle with the aroma of roasted meats and spiced wines. Lavender, rose, and myrrh drift invisibly, marking refinement, lineage, and taste. Every sense is engaged, every observation recorded, interpreted, and remembered. The feast is a lesson in subtlety, a demonstration of strategy, and a meditation on presence. Even in silence, the table speaks. Every color, every shimmer of fabric, every reflected light tells a story of ambition, hierarchy, and careful negotiation. Eyes meet and linger. Glances are noted. Subtle gestures signal loyalty, preference, or quiet assertion. The feast is not only for the stomach, it is for perception, for the cultivation of influence, and the art of subtle control. Here, ritual and spectacle intertwine. The table becomes a stage, the diners performers, and every element, clothing, food, gesture, fragrance, light, is a participant in the hypnotic, silent conversation of power and identity. Every movement within the hall carries meaning. Every tilt of the head, every bend of the wrist, every glance exchanged across the polished stone floors is part of a silent, hypnotic dialogue. The courtly gesture is a language of its own, a subtle, intricate, and deliberate performance, through which ambition, loyalty, and desire are communicated without words. A noblewoman lifts her hands slightly, the delicate curve of her fingers catching the sunlight, the folds of her sleeve accentuating the motion. The gesture is not accidental. It is precise, practiced, and intentional. It signals respect, acknowledgement, perhaps even subtle favor or caution. Every observer notes it. Every subtle shift in posture, every measured movement, is absorbed, interpreted, remembered. Men adjust their stance with equal care. The codpiece, pointed shoes, and layered tunics all respond to the motion of the body, emphasizing status, refinement, and presence. A careful lean toward a goblet, a slight turn of the shoulder, a measured pause before speaking. These are gestures laden with significance. They reveal deference, assert influence, and communicate intentions, as delicately and deliberately as the written law itself. Even the eyes participate. Glances are fleeting yet deliberate. A silent acknowledgement, a careful observation, a message sent and received within the unspoken code of the court. One glance might convey curiosity, interest, or silent agreement. Another, disapproval, warning, or gentle correction. The rhythm of eye contact forms a conversation as intricate and nuanced as any spoken debate or counsel. Attendants hover in the periphery, unseen yet essential. They smooth fabric, adjust veils, polish accessories, and ensure that each gesture, each movement, is framed perfectly within the silent language of the hall. Even their own motion is choreographed, subtle, and deliberate, part of the larger performance, part of the hypnotic ritual of observation. The architecture itself participates. Stone corridors and high-ceilinged chambers amplify gestures, echoing footsteps, capturing the rustle of fabric, reflecting sunlight across embroidered surfaces. Every spatial choice, every pause along the hall, shapes perception, guides attention, and enhances the message conveyed. Through the silent courtly dance, perfume and fragrance accompany gesture. Lavender, rose, and myrrh cling softly to fabric, drifting with motion, signaling refinement, status, and awareness. Every inhale carries the essence of presence. Every subtle movement amplifies perception, making the hall a living, breathing text of silent communication. The courtly gesture is at once personal and social, intimate yet public, subtle yet commanding. It is a tool for negotiation, for signaling, for subtle manipulation, and for expressing loyalty, ambition, or desire. It requires awareness, practice, and attention, for even a misstep can shift perception, alter favor, or expose vulnerability. Through this hypnotic choreography, the court becomes a theater of silent diplomacy. Every participant performs, observes, and responds, their identities shaped by gesture, movement, and perception. It is a language learned over years, honed through experience, and rehearsed within the quiet, measured rhythm of daily life. Here, in the soft sunlight of castle halls, with fabric flowing, codpieces gleaming, and pointed shoes tapping lightly on stone, every gesture is intentional, every pause is considered, and every motion becomes part of a grand, silent, mesmerizing conversation, a hypnotic dance of hierarchy, identity, and subtle influence. that defines the rhythm and ritual of medieval social life. Seating is never random. It is a ritual, a choreography of rank, influence, and silent communication. The placement of each nobleman and noblewoman is carefully considered, measured, and observed. To occupy a particular chair, a particular side of the table, is to assert identity, claim visibility, and participate consciously in the delicate theater of hierarchy. The host watches attentively, orchestrating the arrangement like a conductor guiding an orchestra. Each position communicates allegiance, favor, or subtle warning. Proximity to the head of the table signals trust, importance, and intimacy. Distance signals caution, respect, or deliberate restraint. The flow of conversation, the gaze of observers, and even the ease of reaching a platter or goblet become components of a silent, hypnotic performance. Attendants guide movement with quiet precision. They ensure robes and gowns fall correctly. Veils frame faces without hiding subtle gestures. Codpieces and pointed shoes align with polished floors. Every step, every adjustment, every careful placement is part of a ritual that speaks louder than words. Noblewomen settle into chairs with deliberate grace. Their layered garments cascade across the seat. Silks, velvets, and brocades arranged to project elegance and refinement. Hands rest lightly upon the table or in laps. Fingers curved, poised, expressing subtle social signals. Eyes meet across the hall, glances exchanged like silent messages, communicating allegiance, curiosity, admiration, or measured restraint. Men follow their own choreography. Codpieces catch light, emphasizing presence. Tunics ripple with movement, embroidered hems signaling wealth and lineage. Every shift in posture, every adjustment of a belt, every careful lean toward a goblet or plate is observed and interpreted, a subtle negotiation of attention, power, and perception. The hall itself becomes a participant. Stone floors echo steps, polished surfaces reflect gestures. Sunlight strikes embroidery, gilded thread, and jewelry, casting dancing patterns across tapestries depicting hunts, feasts, and ceremonies. Even the smallest motion is amplified, magnified into meaning, subtle or profound. Perfume and scent drift through the air, a companion to gesture and posture. Lavender, rose, and myrrh follow the seated noble, marking presence and refinement. Even the act of inhaling becomes ritual, attuned to observation, perception, and silent dialogue. Seating is an exercise in control, in diplomacy, in hypnotic artistry. It teaches humility, demonstrates influence, and conveys social intelligence. A slight shift, a careful crossing of the legs, a hand brushing the tabletop can communicate loyalty, wit, or subtle ambition without uttering a single syllable. In this grand hall, hierarchy is tangible, woven into every chair, every position, every careful gesture. The noblewoman's layered gown, the nobleman's codpiece, pointed shoes, and embroidered tunic all interact with the space and with one another, forming a living tableau of subtle negotiation, ritual observation, and hypnotic social discourse. The subtle art of seating is a meditation in observation. It teaches that power is not only spoken, but demonstrated, choreographed, and perceived. It is a silent symphony of posture, proximity, and grace, a hypnotic rhythm that dictates influence, reputation, and recognition. As the castle breathes with history, hierarchy, and measured elegance, every chair, every arrangement, every movement becomes a conversation, an unspoken yet deeply understood dialogue that shapes perception, opportunity, and social equilibrium. And as the hall settles, with the sunlight soft on stone and silk, the noble participants move with careful awareness, immersed in the quiet, mesmerizing art of presence, observation, and subtle influence. Favor is never demanded. It is earned quietly, subtly, through movement, gesture, and the measured distribution of attention. The dance of favor unfolds as a hypnotic, almost imperceptible ritual, where every step, every glance, every adjustment of sleeve or hem carries intention and meaning. A noblewoman leans slightly toward a confidant, her hands resting lightly on the polished tabletop, fingers tracing the edge of embroidered cloth. The tilt of her head, the cadence of her speech, the soft sparkle of a jewel catching sunlight, all communicate interest, allegiance, or gentle persuasion. It is a silent negotiation, a choreography of influence performed without words. Men follow their own careful rhythm, codpieces gleaming, tunics layered and embroidered, shoes pointed and precise, every motion deliberate. A slight bow, a hand offered, a measured pause near a favored guest. Each movement conveys subtle signals, an invitation to confidence, a claim of loyalty, or a demonstration of refinement. The hall itself is alive with observation. Stone floors echo soft footsteps. Sunlight dances across gold thread, silk, and velvet, casting ever-shifting reflections across tapestries depicting hunts, feasts, and royal ceremonies. The very architecture participates, amplifying gestures, magnifying posture, and guiding perception through deliberate arrangement of space and light. Attendants, unseen yet essential, glide through corridors. They smooth hems, adjust veils, align codpieces, and subtly position participants to optimize presence, ensuring that every gesture communicates precisely the intended degree of deference, respect, or subtle assertiveness. Perfume and fragrance intertwine with motion. Lavender, rose, and myrrh drift invisibly, marking distinction, lineage, and cultivated taste. Every inhalation becomes a meditation, every subtle sway of the body a message to those attuned to the silent code of the court. The dance of favor is a meditation in perception. Favor cannot be seized. It is observed, received, and interpreted. It is reflected in the tilt of a head, the brief touch of a hand, the fleeting catch of sunlight on a jewel, or the careful alignment of a gown or tunic. It is hypnotic in its subtlety, profound in its effect, shaping alliances, trust, and influence without a single spoken word. Through the hall, participants glide in measured elegance. Every glance, every gesture, every adjustment becomes part of a living, breathing dialogue. It is a delicate interplay of hierarchy and individuality, obedience and subtle assertion, ritual and personal expression, woven together in a seamless tapestry of silent negotiation. The noblewoman's eyes meet those of a favored courtier. A slight nod, a careful incline of her body, a whisper of perfume drifting through the space, all combine into a message that is understood instantly by those attuned to the rhythm of influence and observation. Here, in the measured cadence of the hall, favor is not declared. It is signaled, negotiated, and maintained through the quiet, mesmerizing choreography of gesture, posture, and presence. It is power expressed through subtlety, a hypnotic dance that flows like sunlight across stone, fabric, and gold, guiding perception, shaping alliances, and maintaining the delicate balance of medieval hierarchy. Every movement matters. Every glance counts. Every gesture contributes to a symphony of influence, where the dance of favor becomes both art and strategy, ritual and negotiation, and where the participants move hypnotically through space, their identities defined as much by presence and perception as by title, wealth, or law. Some conversations are spoken openly, but the most potent counsel is whispered. It flows in hushed tones, carried through the subtle incline of a head, the delicate curve of a hand, the soft rustle of fabric as bodies lean closer, creating an intimate dialogue that escapes the gaze of the inattentive. In these moments, strategy unfolds quietly, invisible to all but those attuned to the rhythm of influence. A noblewoman bends slightly, her hand lightly brushing the edge of a table, fingers grazing a tray of perfumed oils, her voice barely audible, yet every word deliberate, precise, intentional. The advice she offers, the hint she conveys, weaves through the hall invisibly, shaping decisions, alliances, and perceptions. Men, too, participate in this hypnotic dance of counsel. Codpieces gleaming subtly, tunics layered and embroidered, pointed shoes angled precisely. Each motion conveys attentiveness, deference, or quiet authority. A careful tilt of the shoulder, a measured pause, a slight shift closer or further. These silent gestures amplify and underscore the spoken whisper, embedding meaning in posture, proximity, and presence. The hall itself is a participant in this secret discourse. Stone floors absorb whispers, reflecting them faintly in the echoes that follow footsteps. Sunlight through stained glass windows glints off embroidery, gold thread, and jewels, casting shadows that enhance the hypnotic subtlety of the moment. Even the architecture listens, capturing nuance, transforming whispers into an invisible resonance that guides perception and memory. Perfume and fragrance drift alongside the whispered words. Rose, myrrh, and lavender trail the speaker and listener, marking their proximity, their refinement, and their subtle influence. Every inhalation, every subtle movement, becomes part of the silent orchestration of courtly diplomacy. The tension is concentrated, senses heightened, and meaning is encoded not just in words, but in gesture, scent, and presence. The whispered counsel is a delicate meditation in trust and discretion. Every pause is considered, every syllable weighed, every glance recorded and interpreted. To offer counsel is to shape perception, to guide action, and to craft opportunity, without overt declaration, without visible assertion of power. Even those who seem passive are active participants. A gentle nod, a soft smile, a measured inclination of the body can validate a suggestion, signal agreement, or silently challenge intention. The interplay of gesture, posture, and whisper forms a hypnotic dialogue, where influence is negotiated quietly, invisibly, yet profoundly. In these moments, the castle transforms. Stone walls and polished floors become a silent stage, light and shadow acting as allies in the choreography of discretion. Clothing, accessories, codpieces, pointed shoes, and flowing gowns all contribute to the language of presence, reflecting hierarchy, status, refinement, and awareness. The whispered counsel teaches patience, subtlety, and awareness. It reminds every participant that power is as much perceived as spoken, that influence flows quietly, and that true understanding often emerges in silence, in the measured cadence of shared attention, in the hypnotic rhythm of trust, observation, and deliberate action. Here, in the quiet corners of the hall, alliance is formed, favor is nurtured, and opportunity is glimpsed and secured, through whispers carried on the soft rustle of fabric, through gestures light as air, through the measured, hypnotic dance of presence, perception, and subtle strategy. And so, the hall continues to breathe with life, its polished stone and tapestries absorbing every secret motion, every whispered word, every silent signal of influence, transforming these private exchanges into a profound, unseen current that shapes the rhythm, hierarchy, and destiny of all who dwell within. Arrival is not simply the crossing of a threshold. It is a ritual, a deliberate performance, a measured choreography that announces presence, intention, and awareness. The polished stone floor becomes a stage, every step amplified by echoes, every motion observed and interpreted. Noblemen and noblewomen move with careful grace, their layered garments flowing, their codpieces and pointed shoes catching the sunlight, each motion calculated to convey refinement, status, and decorum. Veils are adjusted, sleeves aligned, jewelry positioned to glint with subtlety, and every gesture is imbued with the quiet power of anticipation. Attendants glide alongside, ensuring every hem falls correctly, every veil frames the face. Every accessory rests precisely where it should, so that presence is seamless, deliberate, hypnotic. Even the softest footfall is orchestrated, a rhythm that signals elegance, composure, and mindful awareness. The gaze is as important as the step. Eyes sweep the hall, observing peers, noting hierarchy, assessing favor, and silently calibrating the subtle negotiations of the court. A tilt of the head, a careful lift of the chin, a measured pause at the entrance. Each movement is both personal expression and social signal, communicating more than words could ever achieve. Perfumes trail the arriving noble, rose, myrrh, and lavender weaving with the soft warmth of torches, marking presence and refinement, leaving a subtle signature of status in the air. Every inhale, every subtle motion, adds layers of meaning to the hypnotic choreography of arrival. The architecture itself participates in the ritual. Arched windows filter sunlight onto polished floors. Tapestries and banners catch the light, reflecting colors, threads, and glimmers of jewelry, enhancing the visual language of presence and intent. Stone walls absorb sound, echoing steps and rustles, magnifying gesture and posture into deliberate statements of identity. Arrival is a statement of self-awareness, a careful negotiation of hierarchy, influence, and perception. Proximity to key figures, positioning in the hall, the subtle orientation of the body. All are silently noted and interpreted. Even the briefest interaction, the lightest touch of a hand, becomes part of a hypnotic conversation of power and subtlety. The ritual of arrival teaches patience, observation, and intentionality. It reminds the noble participant that influence begins before words are spoken, that presence is an instrument of power, and that even the simplest gestures, when measured, can communicate strategy, respect, or subtle ambition. As the hall breathes with motion, with light catching fabric and jewelry, with fragrance lingering in the air, the arriving noble moves not merely into a space, but into a living, breathing network of hierarchy, ritual, and perception. Each step, each glance, each adjustment becomes a silent verse in the hypnotic, ongoing poetry of courtly life. Here, in the soft interplay of movement, light, and awareness, arrival is more than entry. It is introduction, performance, negotiation, and meditation. A hypnotic rhythm that sets the tone for every gesture, every glance, and every interaction that will follow, weaving the subtle, silent threads of influence into the very fabric of medieval existence. Every gaze carries weight. Every glance measures, evaluates, and records. In the grand hall, eyes become instruments of perception, tools of influence, and channels through which favor, caution, and ambition are conveyed. The eyes that measure see more than posture or dress. They see intention, awareness, subtle hesitation, and quiet assertion. A noblewoman's gaze sweeps the room, soft yet deliberate, attentive yet unreadable. Her eyes trace the curves of gowns, the alignment of codpieces, the subtle movements of hands and shoulders, absorbing information, interpreting meaning, decoding the silent language of gesture and posture. Men, too, participate in this hypnotic scrutiny. Eyes flicker with interest, calculation, or assessment, catching glimmers of jewelry, the flow of fabric, the tilt of a head. Every glance is a question, a measurement, a silent inquiry into status, loyalty, or ambition. Even the smallest shift of the shoulder, the subtle crossing of a leg, or the briefest incline of the chin, becomes part of this silent dialogue of evaluation. The hall amplifies observation. Stone floors echo footsteps, fabric rustles, and whispered words, turning motion into meaning, presence into influence. Sunlight glancing off polished surfaces, gold thread, and jewels, creates shifting patterns that draw attention, guide perception, and highlight subtle cues. Attendants move quietly, smoothing hems, adjusting veils, ensuring that each participant presents with careful precision. Their presence is nearly invisible, yet essential, enhancing the clarity and impact of every measured glance. Even the air is filled with signals, the scent of lavender, rose, and myrrh, drifting subtly, marking presence and refinement, reinforcing what the eyes already perceive. The eyes that measure are patient, deliberate, and hypnotic. They absorb the rhythm of the hall, the flow of gesture, the tilt of heads, the alignment of posture. Every moment becomes data, every interaction a layer of understanding, every glance a silent negotiation of influence and perception. Favor, caution, curiosity, and restraint are all discerned. Through these hypnotic currents of observation, one measured glance can validate loyalty, another can signal disapproval, and yet another may quietly invite conversation, connection, or alignment. Observation is both personal and social. It shapes relationships, alliances, and opportunity. It instructs the cautious, rewards the attentive, and punishes the oblivious. The eyes that measure govern the rhythm of courtly life, ensuring that hierarchy, status, and influence remain fluid yet perceptible, subtle yet profound, hypnotic yet immediate. In this hall, no motion is insignificant, no gaze is idle. Every glance, every careful sweep of the eyes, every silent measurement contributes to the ongoing choreography of presence, awareness, and social negotiation. The eyes that measure are the unseen arbiters of influence, quietly dictating favor, opportunity, and perception, shaping alliances, guiding interaction, and orchestrating the hypnotic rhythm of courtly life, where every participant is both observer and observed. Every motion carries meaning, and every glance becomes part of a silent, mesmerizing dialogue that defines power, hierarchy, and identity. Gesture is language, subtle yet profound. It does not speak through words, but through the movement of hands, the tilt of a head, the curve of a shoulder, the gentle sweep of a gown across polished stone. The gentle art of gesture is a meditation in silence, where meaning flows in the rhythm of motion, and influence travels through space like sunlight across the hall. A noblewoman lifts her hand just slightly, fingers extended with delicate precision. The movement seems almost accidental, yet it conveys grace, attentiveness, and quiet authority. Her wrist twists subtly, catching the light on a ring set with rubies and gold, signaling status, taste, and refinement without a single syllable. A slight inclination of her head toward a favored courtier becomes an invitation, a suggestion, a silent acknowledgement of alliance. Men, too, navigate this hypnotic dance of gesture. A hand resting lightly on a chair, a codpiece polished to catch a glint of sunlight, a foot angled slightly forward, shoes pointed with exactitude, all communicate intention, loyalty, and awareness. Each motion is measured, deliberate, calibrated to project confidence without arrogance, to demonstrate presence without aggression, to influence subtly without overt declaration. The hall itself participates in this choreography. Stone floors echo footsteps, amplifying the rhythm of motion. Sunlight through tall windows glances off tapestries and jewelry, illuminating gestures in a way that emphasizes meaning, drawing attention to subtle movements that might otherwise go unnoticed. The architecture magnifies presence, turning motion into language and silence into conversation. Attendants glide discreetly, smoothing hems, adjusting veils, ensuring that each participant's gesture communicates precisely the intended message. Even the gentle sweep of fabric as it brushes the floor becomes part of the hypnotic vocabulary of influence. Perfume trails softly, rose, myrrh, and lavender marking the air, so that every inhalation, every subtle movement, becomes part of the living dialogue of courtly negotiation. Gesture shapes perception. It conveys attentiveness, respect, subtle challenge, or quiet persuasion. A slight crossing of the arms may signal consideration. A slow, deliberate sip of wine may denote patience or contemplation. A hand placed lightly on a chair or table may indicate alliance or authority. Every action, every adjustment, every deliberate pause carries weight, interpreted instantly by the eyes that measure, the minds that observe, the senses attuned to the rhythm of presence. The gentle art of gesture is a hypnotic meditation in awareness. It teaches patience, precision, and subtlety. It reminds the participant that influence is not only spoken or written, but felt, perceived, and absorbed in the quiet currents of motion. It is a rhythm of presence, a language of silent negotiation, an art that flows like light across stone floors, fabric, and gilded jewelry, connecting the seen and the unseen, the intentional and the observed. In this hall, gestures form a continuum of meaning, where even the smallest motion can shift perception, alter alliance, or subtly affirm status. The tilt of a chin, the slight extension of fingers, the graceful inclination of the body, the measured alignment of fabric and adornment, all converge in a hypnotic symphony of silent communication. The participant who masters this art moves like sunlight, effortless yet deliberate, soft yet commanding, subtle yet profound, their presence a meditation in motion, their gestures shaping perception, guiding attention, and orchestrating influence with an elegance that words could never achieve. Every glance, every touch, every sweep of fabric becomes part of a living, breathing choreography of power, perception, and hierarchy. The gentle art of gesture reminds all within the hall that silence is never empty, that motion is never meaningless, and that the slow, deliberate rhythm of presence can become the most persuasive voice of all. Perfume is never merely scent. It is language, subtle and pervasive, a signal that drifts invisibly, conveying favor, status, intention, and awareness. The perfume signal is a silent mediator, an unspoken current that flows through the hall, weaving presence into perception and perception into influence. A noblewoman dips her fingers into a vial of lavender and rose oil, rubbing it gently on her wrists and neck. The fragrance rises in a soft spiral, lingering in the air as if tracing her movements, an invisible marker that announces refinement, attentiveness, and careful strategy. Those attuned to these subtle cues perceive more than mere scent. They recognize alliance, aspiration, and deliberate presence. Men, too, engage in this perfumed choreography. A dab of myrrh behind the ear, a hint of amber on the sleeve, carries meaning beyond appearance, signaling wealth, taste, and the ability to navigate the silent currents of courtly life. Even the smallest motion, a hand raised, a tilt of the chin, intertwines with fragrance, transforming gesture into a multi-sensory language that speaks without words and resonates without sound. The hall itself magnifies these subtle signals. Stone floors reflect footsteps and gesture. Windows scatter sunlight across fabric and gold thread. Tapestries shimmer in diffused color, and fragrance moves along currents of heat and motion, marking presence as surely as embroidered insignia. Perfume becomes a living thread of communication, an ephemeral yet persistent trace of identity, intention, and influence. Attendants move unobtrusively, ensuring oils are applied, veils adjusted, fabrics aligned, so that every scent, every movement, every gesture is synchronized into a hypnotic flow of presence. A carefully applied fragrance accentuates posture, enhances gesture, and amplifies subtle social signals, rendering the invisible visible and the unspoken deeply comprehensible to those who observe attentively. The perfumed signal teaches attentiveness, patience, and perception. It reminds every participant that influence extends beyond words. That identity is curated through motion, gesture, and scent, and that the quiet currents of favor, observation, and alliance are as critical as any overt declaration of status. Through this invisible language, relationships are formed, alliances nurtured, and subtle hierarchies maintained. A gentle wave of lavender may soothe suspicion, a whisper of rose may invite conversation, and a hint of myrrh may signal authority, confidence, or cultivated taste. Each fragrance, carefully applied, becomes a silent note in the hypnotic symphony of courtly life. The hall breathes with these signals, every movement, every gesture, every note of fragrance, weaving together in a mesmerizing pattern that guides attention, shapes perception, and orchestrates the rhythm of presence, power, and influence. In the world of subtle communication, perfume is a voice as persuasive as the most carefully measured gesture. It speaks of refinement, intention, and awareness, sends currents of favor through the air, and binds the invisible threads of hierarchy and alliance into a living, breathing, hypnotic dance. Here, every inhalation, every subtle swirl of fragrance, every motion that carries scent, becomes part of the silent poetry of courtly existence, a meditation in perception, presence, and the delicate, mesmerizing art of influence. The court is not a place of mere motion or sound. It is a living, breathing symphony, a silent orchestra where each participant contributes a note, a rhythm, a resonance without uttering a single word. Gesture, the gentle sweep of fabric, the tilt of a head, becomes an instrument of influence. Gaze, measured, attentive, calculating, resonates like a string pulled taut, vibrating with subtle meaning. Perfume, delicate and deliberate, drifts through the hall, marking presence like a soft, invisible melody. Footsteps on polished stone, echoing lightly, become percussion in the quiet orchestration of perception and hierarchy. Every motion, every inhalation of scent, every glance, is synchronized into an invisible rhythm that flows through the polished stone, threads through the embroidered fabric, and glimmers in the light reflected off jewels and gilded edges. The hall itself participates, amplifying every gesture, every motion, every whisper of fragrance, creating a hypnotic resonance that informs and directs attention, that shapes alliance, favor, and perception. Noble women move with grace, their gowns trailing like ribbons of measured influence, their fingers extended in subtle, precise gestures, communicating attentiveness, authority, and quiet persuasion. Noblemen, too, navigate the hall like instruments, their codpieces polished, shoes pointed, tunics layered, to catch the light and convey refinement, status, and composure. Even the smallest motion, a slight inclination, a pause, a hand resting lightly, becomes part of the orchestra, a note that contributes to the hypnotic rhythm of presence and power. Attendants glide almost invisibly, smoothing hems, adjusting veils, ensuring the flow of garments aligns perfectly with the unspoken choreography of courtly life. Trays of perfumed oils, mirrors, and jewelry are positioned with care, their placement enhancing the silent symphony, amplifying the effect of gesture, gaze, and scent. Even fragrance drifts in harmonized patterns, rose, myrrh, and lavender weaving through space, like a subtle, persistent melody, adding depth, nuance, and resonance to the silent orchestra. Observation is as crucial as motion. The eyes that measure absorb the rhythm, noting every detail, interpreting every nuance, weaving the invisible threads of hierarchy, influence, and subtle negotiation. Each glance becomes a chord, each gesture a note, each carefully applied fragrance a soft, lingering resonance, all converging into a hypnotic composition of social presence and awareness. The silent orchestra teaches attentiveness, patience, and mastery. It reminds every participant that influence is orchestrated, that power is communicated through motion as much as speech, that hierarchy is maintained through observation, gesture, and scent, and that subtlety is often more profound than overt declaration. Here, every step, every tilt, every sweep of fabric, every inhalation of perfume, every glance, becomes part of a living, breathing meditation, a hypnotic dance of presence, perception, and influence, where silence resonates louder than speech, and stillness can command attention more profoundly than motion. In this hall, all things converge: gesture, gaze, fragrance, motion, forming a seamless, hypnotic, silent orchestra, where every participant is both musician and audience, where the rhythm of presence, power, and perception flows continuously, deliberately, and irresistibly, shaping alliances, guiding awareness, and orchestrating the delicate, mesmerizing art of medieval courtly life. And as the sunlight drifts across stone, fabric, and gold, and fragrance lingers in the air, the hall breathes with quiet music, an eternal, hypnotic symphony, where influence, hierarchy, and subtlety are performed, felt and remembered, long after footsteps fade and whispers die away. The chamber is a world apart. The public rhythm of the hall gives way to a softer, more deliberate tempo. Here, in this intimate space, whispers carry the weight of strategy, and glances are as instructive as the longest oration. The secret counsel of the chamber is a meditation in discretion, where influence is refined, alliances are cemented, and intentions crystallize. Noblemen and women gather around polished tables, their hands tracing maps, resting on scrolls, their gestures measured, deliberate, precise. Every movement communicates purpose, alignment, or hesitation. Even the faintest brush of a sleeve, the subtle shift of a chair, becomes a signal interpreted by eyes attuned to the language of presence. Light enters in fragments through narrow windows, illuminating gilded threads, rich fabrics, and jewelry, painting the participants in shifting patterns that accentuate posture, gesture, and attention. The flicker of torchlight casts dancing shadows that intertwine with these signals, amplifying meaning, layering perception, transforming mere motion into silent, resonant dialogue. Perfume drifts through the air, rose, myrrh, lavender, a subtle, almost imperceptible accompaniment to gestures, glances, and soft-spoken words. Each inhalation becomes a measure of influence, every exhalation a thread woven into the complex tapestry of intention, alliance, and negotiation. Discussion flows quietly, deliberately. Even silence carries weight. The absence of words allows the unspoken to surface, revealing alliances, ambition, and subtle persuasion. A tilt of the head, a pause in movement, a careful arrangement of hands, all become instruments. In the hypnotic symphony of courtly strategy, attendants move unobtrusively, adjusting robes, smoothing hems, and subtly ensuring that the rhythm of gesture, gaze, and presence remains undisturbed. Their invisible choreography enhances the resonance of influence, allowing subtle cues to travel unimpeded through the soft, charged air of the chamber. The chamber teaches patience, observation, and subtlety. It reminds every participant that the most profound influence is often invisible, inaudible, yet deeply felt. Strategy unfolds not through declaration alone, but through measured gesture, scent, posture, and attentive observation. The careful orchestration of these elements creates a hypnotic, silent dialogue, a meditation in awareness, timing, and perception. Here, favor is signaled not with pomp, but through touch, glance, and whispered counsel. Loyalty is demonstrated not by proclamation, but by posture, alignment, and the rhythm of gesture. Ambition is revealed in the slightest motion, the most delicate shift of fabric, or the faintest tilt of the head, all noted, measured, and absorbed by attentive eyes. The secret counsel of the chamber is a living meditation, where influence is refined, perception is heightened, and the currents of hierarchy, power, and alliance flow silently yet irresistibly. Every participant is both musician and audience. Every gesture, glance, and sigh, becoming part of a hypnotic, multi-layered symphony that guides attention, shapes perception, and orchestrates the delicate, mesmerizing art of courtly life. As light fades and shadows lengthen, the chamber continues its quiet rhythm. Perfume lingers, gestures resonate, and glances echo. Every movement, every subtle cue, every unspoken word remains etched in perception, a meditation in patience, subtlety, and influence that continues long after the chamber doors close and the secrets of counsel settle into memory. Favor is a delicate instrument. It cannot be claimed through force, demand, or brash display. It must be courted, nurtured, and perceived, earned through patience, subtlety, and unspoken understanding. Discretion is its partner, a silent guardian ensuring that every move, every gesture, every carefully orchestrated glance conveys intention without exposure, communicates desire without overreach, and shapes influence without leaving vulnerability. The dance of favor and discretion is never hurried. It unfolds with hypnotic precision, a slow, measured choreography of motion and perception, where each participant becomes both dancer and audience, absorbing signals, interpreting meaning, and responding with gestures, glances, and posture, as deliberate and intentional as the stroke of a master painter. A noblewoman inclines her head just so, allowing the sunlight to catch a jeweled hairpin, subtle yet impossible to ignore. Her gaze lingers momentarily on a favored courtier, and in that still, measured moment, the rhythm of favor begins to flow. Each participant notes, absorbs, and reacts, calibrating gestures, posture, and expression to align with the currents of subtle approval and cautious expectation. Men, too, perform this silent choreography. A hand resting lightly on a table, a slow sip of wine, a tilt of the codpiece catching light at just the right angle. All communicate awareness, alignment, and attentiveness. Discretion tempers display, ensuring that influence is conveyed without overexposure, that favor is earned without jeopardizing position, that every motion resonates within the unspoken rules of the hall. Perfume drifts softly, rose, myrrh, and lavender weaving through the air, each inhalation reinforcing subtle messages of attention, loyalty, and refined presence. Attendants move like shadows, invisible yet essential, smoothing hems, adjusting veils, and maintaining the seamless flow of gesture, scent, and posture. Their presence ensures that every participant can engage fully in the hypnotic dance of favor and discretion, without disruption, without error, without distraction. The hall itself amplifies this hypnotic rhythm. Stone floors echo lightly, sunlight dances across tapestries, and reflections on jewelry and gold thread catch the eye of those attuned to the language of influence. Even the silence is deliberate, allowing unspoken currents of favor to settle, flow, and resonate, creating a living, breathing choreography, where presence is as persuasive as speech, and subtlety as commanding as authority. Each motion is measured, each glance deliberate, each inhalation of perfume an invisible note in the symphony of influence. Favor is extended not with flourish or declaration, but with nuanced gestures, silent acknowledgement, and the hypnotic cadence of carefully aligned presence. Discretion ensures that this gift of recognition is both understood and safeguarded, maintaining hierarchy, trust, and subtle authority. The dance of favor and discretion is endless, a continuous meditation in perception, patience, and refined social rhythm. It teaches that power is never overtly displayed, but earned and sustained through observation, awareness, and subtle alignment. It is the heartbeat of the court, the pulse of influence, a hypnotic interplay of gesture, gaze, scent, and posture that continues long after footsteps fade, long after candles gutter in their sconces, and long after voices fall silent, leaving the hall echoing with memory, with rhythm, with the enduring, invisible music of power and presence. In the shadows of the hall, where light and stone converge, conversation becomes a secret art, and whispers carry weight heavier than any spoken decree. The whispered council of shadows is a meditation in discretion, a slow, deliberate choreography of words, gesture, and presence, where alliances are forged quietly, intentions are revealed subtly, and the rhythm of influence pulses beneath the visible surface of the court. A nobleman leans slightly forward, voice soft, almost inaudible, his fingers tracing invisible patterns along the edge of a table. Each word, measured and deliberate, balances persuasion with caution, imparting guidance, counsel, or warning, while preserving trust, secrecy, and authority. His companion, a noblewoman of refined presence, tilts her head, catching the torchlight in a jeweled hairpin, listening intently, absorbing meaning, and replying, with gestures as subtle as the movements of sunlight across stone floors. A tilt of the chin, a slow nod, the careful placement of a hand, conveys understanding, assent, and silent acknowledgement. Even the pause between words resonates, allowing the unspoken to flow through the space, revealing more than any declaration ever could. Perfume drifts gently, rose, amber, myrrh, enhancing the hypnotic rhythm of whispered counsel. It wraps around words like invisible punctuation, guiding attention, amplifying meaning, and marking presence in the quiet, deliberate space of negotiation. Attendants hover unobtrusively, ensuring that garments fall just so, veils are arranged, and subtle signs of status and alignment remain undisturbed. Their invisible choreography preserves the hypnotic rhythm of presence, movement, and observation, allowing whispered counsel to unfold without disruption. In this world, the weight of influence is measured not in volume, but in subtlety, timing, and perception. A single whispered phrase, a carefully chosen gesture, a momentary alignment of gaze and posture, can shift alliances, solidify trust, and redirect the currents of favor and authority. The whispered counsel of shadows teaches patience and awareness. It reminds the courtier that the most profound negotiations are those conducted in silence, with observation, and with measured, deliberate motion. Power is not demanded here. It is offered, received, and reciprocated through the hypnotic interplay of presence, discretion, and unspoken understanding. Every gesture, every glance, every inhalation of perfumed air becomes part of an invisible dialogue, a meditation in strategy, subtlety, and perception. The shadows themselves seem to breathe with intent, reflecting, amplifying, and sustaining the quiet orchestration of influence. Here, words are whispers, gestures are melodies, and the currents of alliance flow like light along stone and tapestry. The whispered counsel of shadows is the heartbeat of unseen power, the quiet, hypnotic pulse that shapes the destiny of the court, guiding presence, perception, and influence. Long after the voices fade, long after the torches gutter, and long after the hall is emptied of its visible actors, leaving memory, rhythm, and the enduring music of strategy lingering in the air. And so the hall breathes, a living testament to presence, power, and perception. Every motion, every gesture, every glance, every whisper has contributed to the hypnotic symphony that resonates through stone, tapestry, fabric, and light. Perfume still lingers in the air, an invisible thread weaving memory into motion, reminding every participant that influence is delicate, that favor is never demanded, only cultivated, and that the currents of alliance flow softly, invisibly, persistently. The whispers have faded, but their echoes linger in posture, in gaze, in the subtle tilt of a head. The silent orchestra, the perfumed signal, the dance of favor and discretion, the whispered counsel of shadows, all converge here, melding into a single, continuous meditation on observation, patience, subtlety, and awareness. Even the stone seems to remember the rhythm, echoing the measured footsteps, the soft swish of fabric, the gentle alignment of gaze, as if the hall itself is alive with memory, absorbing, preserving, and amplifying the hypnotic, unspoken lessons of presence and influence. Attendants glide quietly, almost invisible, ensuring the seamless continuation of ritual, that every hem, veil, and gesture remains aligned, a subtle meditation on order, attention, and care. The perfumed currents swirl softly, lingering like whispers of thought and intention, a reminder that influence is both delicate and enduring, felt long after the hall falls silent. And as dusk deepens, sunlight retreating, shadows stretching across polished stone, every noble, every attendant, every observer becomes part of a timeless reflection, a living memory of ritual, presence, and hierarchy. Power is not in proclamation, but in subtlety. Favor is not in demand, but in cultivation. And influence is not in noise, but in the quiet, hypnotic rhythm of attention, perception, and grace. The hall exhales, a soft, resonant breath of memory and presence. And in that exhalation, in that lingering trace of perfume, gesture, and gaze, the court becomes more than stone, more than fabric, more than noble or attendant. It becomes meditation, hypnotic, enduring, eternal, a quiet symphony of influence, where every silent note resonates forever, through the heart of memory, through the breath of perception, through the endless rhythm of presence itself. The hall stands, empty yet alive, silent yet speaking, a final, enduring testament to the hypnotic art of courtly life and the subtle, invisible power of awareness, patience, and grace. And now, as the hall falls silent, as shadows stretch across stone and tapestry, we step back from the rhythm, the whispers, the perfumes, the subtle choreography of presence and influence. All that was deliberate, all that was silent, all that was unspoken yet deeply felt, lingers in memory as a gentle current beneath the surface of thought. The perfumed signals, the silent orchestra, the dance of favor and discretion, the whispered counsel of shadows. These are not merely acts of courtly ritual, but meditations in patience, perception, and awareness, lessons in presence that extend far beyond stone walls and gilded halls. In Rome, in Egypt, in medieval courts, the interplay of gesture, gaze, fragrance, and ritual revealed the invisible architecture of power. The Vestal virgins maintained sacred fire. The courtesans commanded the stage of influence. The noble women and men of medieval halls navigated subtle currents of favor and attention with grace, caution, and hypnotic precision. And now, as our journey gently draws to a close, let the echoes of these centuries linger softly, like perfumed air drifting through sunlit chambers, like shadows stretching across polished stone, like gestures remembered in quiet reflection. Power was never only in speech. Influence was never only in action. Presence, subtlety, and attention carved paths that endured beyond the reach of time, leaving traces in memory, in ritual, in the quiet music of observation. Breathe slowly, feel the rhythm of history, the hypnotic cadence of gestures, glances, and whispers. Settle gently in your mind. Let it flow through you, a meditation in awareness, patience, and grace, an enduring lesson from halls, courts, temples, and chambers long past. And now, in this quiet moment, allow the echoes of presence, the currents of subtle power, and the soft, lingering fragrance of history to carry you into rest, to carry you gently into dreams, where the invisible symphony of influence continues to move, breathe, and resonate, softly, endlessly, quietly, like the eternal, hypnotic rhythm of life itself.